Great Wall the Jet 5. It's asking where to find resources to create playbooks and how to IGL. Now, first and foremost, where to find resources to create playbooks. Only myself and Wahoojan are creating solo queue playbooks. I don't know who the fuck else is making a solo queue playbook that's public or is organized at all. I've had coaches in the past that have had playbooks, but they're not public and they're not organized. With the upcoming Premier mode, I want to IGL or at least be the shot caller for my team. There are a lot of great sources such as TMV and Sovereign Guides who analyze pro games, but how do I create plans based on the pro VODs, and how should the team adapt to counter util or things that may not be expected when originally making game plans? As I mentioned, I also want to IGL. What is the role of the IGL, and how much or little should I be managing and talking to the team, in your opinion? Finally, how should I analyze the enemy team's strengths and weaknesses when I play against them? Is there a list I should go through, such as their playstyle, team comps, and where people play in order to counter strat on the fly? Because watching pros do it seemed like they just know. First of all, when you're watching pros, please always remember, these guys have paid analysts and coaches whose only job is to let the pros know. Keep in mind, every tier 1 IGL has 2 analysts behind him, whose only job is to tell them what to do. Okay? These guys also usually have at least a decade of experience. So you're massively behind in 2 big ways. Don't compare yourself too hard to pro IGLs, you know? Boaster's got a wonderful team behind him, both that he plays with in the server and off the server. So, first of all, how do you create plans based on pro VODs? Pretty simple. You just pick a team and you watch one comp on one map and you copy that and you just try to play exactly like that team. And what you try to do is analyze their playbooks. You want to see what is their pistol round, right? You want to see what do they do when they're retaking a certain site? What do they do when they're playing to hold a certain site? What do they do when they're fast flooding a certain site? What do they do when they have a flanker? Who typically flanks? Stuff like this. You want to figure out protocols based on this and explain those to your team. Here's a quick example from like a solo queue. You can see my KO playbook. So if we go to like Ascent, for example, this was one of the first ones I did. Here's my offensive playbook. Here's my defensive playbook. And these lines demonstrate various frequencies in which I was studying tens, in which tens plays positions, uses utility, and how frequently he rotates to a certain area. So you need to make a system for yourself on how to analyze VODs, which don't start with a system. Start with just watching and coming up with questions. And then as you do that, create a system based off of that. And from there, just pick a team on a comp, on a map, and just strive to copy them. Then you say, how should the team adapt to counter util or things that may not be expected when originally making game plans? So this really comes down to establishing protocols within your team. So for example, you may have a protocol for resetting on a B hit. So you can just say reset, and you would know that like one guy's going to stay B main, everyone else is going to explore mid. When you explore mid, your sky is going to flash, your omen's going to smoke vents, and you're all going to walk up together, right? That can be your B reset, for example. And you're going to want to have a list of these protocols that you eventually come to by watching pro teams and how they reset, watching pro teams and how they react to certain situations that come up over and over again, right? By watching your own VODs back and going, wow, we didn't know what to do here. I didn't know what to call, and I was lost. How can I make sure that that doesn't happen again? That's really the biggest thing about improving especially as an IGL. Our intuition and our ability to make correct calls is purely based on our experience. Every decision you make is purely based off of your past experience, and that's it. You can't make something from nothing. So when you feel lost, when you feel like you don't know the answer, it's probably because you have nothing to draw upon. Take that experience and make it something that you can draw upon, and then go and find that experience within pro VODs and use their experiences to add to your knowledge, so that the next time you run into that same situation, you have this list of experiences that you can draw upon and go, I know what to do here. That's the biggest thing. And that just takes time. There's a reason why IGLs are typically some of the most seasoned veterans on teams. They have the most experience. And in most cases, that's just what it takes. You're not going to put your young stud jet player on shot calling, because your young stud jet player that's 17 years old has probably seen less tactical FPS scenarios in his lifetime than your IGL has in the past 5 years. Or in some cases, the IGL has been playing longer than the jet player has been alive. So it really just comes down to experience, and I intentionally creating protocols based off of experience. When I was IGLing both in the Refine 10-man server and for my team in the or Premier Valorant Association, when I found myself lost, I would literally take a sticky note right after that round. I always have sticky notes nearby. I'd take a sticky note and I would write down what happened. There were 2 in B heaven. I didn't know what to do. Something like that. I write the round and I just take that sticky note. I put it on my wall. I go, I'm going to look at that later. And I move on with the game. It's not easy to identify what you're doing wrong, but we've got a guide for that. And I call it the Triple I framework. You can go to the second link in the description to download it for free. Now let's get back to the video where I teach you how to make better calls for your team. And then I look at that later. I look at my wall. I go, what happened here? I've got stuff on my wall for me to look at. It's pretty empty right now because I don't play ranked as much anymore, and I don't do pro VOD-review or whatever. I don't play as much as I used to. So the wall is pretty devoid of sticky notes outside of that one work note that I have to get to. Well, that's what you do. You make note of it, and you address it later, and you systematize it. And by systematizing enough things, you eventually become better at making intuitive calls. And at the end of the day, the majority of what we do in Valorant is based on intuitive calls. You simply do not have enough time to think during a round. Pre-round, post-round, yeah, you've got like 40 seconds combined to think. But during a round, that's very difficult to do. And you shouldn't put that expectation upon yourself. You should strive to notice where you lack in knowledge, and you should strive to fill those gaps. But you can't make something from nothing. So definitely don't expect yourself to do that during the stress of a round. Now, if we go on, say, as I mentioned, I also want to IGL. What is the role of the IGL, and how much or little should I be managing and talking to the team, in your opinion? Now, the IGL role differs from team to team and from IGL to IGL. Generally, I think what separates the IGL from a general shot caller is your ability to, 1, maintain and control the team's mental and communicative state, as well as being able to adapt to the enemy team in the game. So when you're IGLing, this is also assuming that you're playing with the same team over and over. Mention you're in Premier, or you're planning to play in Premier. When you're IGLing, a big part of your job is being able to take your team and turn them into a cohesive unit. You want it to feel like more than solo queue. And there's 2 ways to do that, and you need to do them both. First of which is having custom time and preparing in custom time and playing together in scrims and in 5 stacks and such. And the second is by understanding each of your players, what makes them tick, what makes them happy, what makes them annoyed, and knowing when to mitigate the negatives and when to accentuate the positives. Knowing how to hype your man up and knowing how to tell your guy to chill out when he gets mad. A lot of being an IGL is really about taking that leader part seriously. I feel like a lot of people forget that the L stands for leader. You really, as a leader, have to understand your people. You have to understand the unit that you take pride in. Now, I take a lot of pride in this because I was in JRTC for 4 years and I was really interested in going into the military and following that route. And when it comes to being a leader, you really have to have a level of understanding for emotional intelligence and really just like understanding who your team is, what your team feels. You have to know each of the guys or girls or whatever on your team, and you have to understand what is their background like, what makes them tick, what makes them annoyed, what makes them angry, what makes them happy. What does it look like when they're having a bad day, both in the game and outside of the game? What does it look like when they're having a good day? What are boundaries, like communicative boundaries that I should have with this person? Like, what are the off limit topics, right? If I mention a certain part of their gameplay, do they get defensive? Why do they get defensive? You should understand these things about your people and be an actual leader. And that's the first part, playing together and understanding each other. The second part of IGLing is mid-rounding and adapting to the enemy team. Now, this is mainly, again, going to come down to your experience in the past, but the IGL is the one role where you're thinking during the round. Most other roles, I just say roll with it, do as you please, and just listen to your IGL. But as the IGL, you got to do some thinking, right? So generally, it comes down to your mid-rounding and your ability to adapt in the post and pre-round to call good calls, and then adapt again in the mid-round when shit doesn't go to plan, because when does it ever go to plan, right? The most important thing, I think, is to learn how to be a good communicator and to learn to quickly and confidently dispel information. So the way I like to think of it is when you're the IGL, it should go straight from thought to action, right? On a lot of other, or in every other role, it goes from thought to communication. You're going, there's 3 sewers, and that's it. IGL, you go, there's 3 sewers, B player, go to A, I'll take up B, right? You're creating action, you're leading the team, you're directing them. And that's huge. Now, the biggest part of that is saying it quickly and confidently. And to do that, you just have to make the call. You just have to trust the first thing that comes to your head and make it go. And if nothing comes to your head, make a note of that and write it down on a sticky note to review later and go, why did nothing come to my head? What could I have done? And hopefully it doesn't happen again. Yeah, I think I had everything in that part. Let me think. Oh yeah, and then thinking during the round, have a protocol where you can say pause and your team will know to tuck, take up crossfires, and chill out for 3 seconds. 1 to 3 seconds, somewhere in there. Just long enough for you to think. Because you do need to make a call. And if nothing's coming to your head, scream pause. Your team will wait for 3 seconds, and then you'll make a call, and we'll move on with the round. Make that a hard protocol with your team. This is something that we used in Refine that really, really helped me when I was learning how to IGL. And thank you, Bobovo, for allowing me to do this, where I would just get stumped. And I would just go pause, pause, pause. And I would have a little think. And whatever wanted to come out of my mouth after that little think came out of my mouth. And sometimes the call was terrible. But you got to learn from that, right? You got to make note of that and go, how do I make it not terrible next time? Because at the end of the day, we're playing to improve, not to win, right? Maybe you make a shit call this time, and maybe that causes you to lose the game. But you can choose to take that as a learning experience and choose to educate yourself based upon that experience, such that you do not make that mistake the next time you run into the same situation. If you made it this far into the video, that means that you're highly motivated to improve at Valorant and you're seeking knowledge, and I've got the perfect thing for you. We have a little something called the Rank Up Challenge. And in our May cohort, which you can sign up for using the link in the description, shirocoaching.com/cohort waitlist, you gain access to a community of players like yourself who are highly motivated and seeking improvement. And additionally, you get access to one of them as your accountability partner and a 200 RR guarantee. As in, you're going to gain 200 RR within a month. I guarantee that. Now let's get back into answering Great Wall to Jet 5's question and learn how to analyze and adapt to the enemy team. That's the most important part of anything in life, not just Valorant. Take upon yourself that improvement mindset, that learner's mindset. Now finally, how should I analyze the enemy team's strengths and weaknesses when I play against them? Is there a list that I should go through, such as their playstyle, team comps, and where people play in order to counter strat on the fly? Because watching pros do it seems like they just know. Now again, pros actually counter strat. Like, they will watch other pros and be like, oh, well, they do this on their pistol round, so we're going to do this to counter them. If you watch TMV, I think he put out a video 2 or 3 days ago where he talked about that. There's a team, I think it was Leviathan, that always does like the same pistol, and some other team just like absolutely countered them on Ascent A. But let's think. So how should I analyze enemy team strengths and weaknesses? So there's like a small list of stuff you can go through. What stalling, what smokes do they have? What trips do they have? What flashes do they have? What hard info do they have? What soft info do they have? What near sights do they have? All that sort of things. Big things that I always look out for is what are their smokes? What are their trips? What are their pop flashes? What are their hard info? And you should be analyzing this during agent select / the loading screen, and seeing how that fleshes out with your team comp. There are going to be things that you can't do against pop flashes. There are going to be things you can't do against a team with a lot of mollies and nades. There are going to be things you can't do against a team with double controller. There are going to be things you can't do against a team with a sentinel. And you need to take that into consideration. Now, next is their playstyle. You should start adapting a playstyle by round 4. First 3 rounds can usually be played on pretty much autopilot. You just adapt to their team comp. But playstyle comes in at least round 4. And that just depends game to game. I can't really teach you that. You're just going to have to play games and watch them back and go, could I have done something better? And always be analytical and critical and be in the mindset to improve. I can't really teach you how to analyze people's playstyles. There's too many. You just have to do it yourself, unfortunately. And you can do it also by watching other people analyze other playstyles. I do plan on starting to do Radiant solo queue analyses daily on Friday, and I might throw pro analysis on top of that. I don't know. But for now, you can watch Teats, Sovereign Guides, and Thinking Man's Valorant. Commend as well. Yeah, so those are 4 channels that you can watch for that. Team comps. Is there a list I should go through? Playstyle, team comps, where people play. Yeah, you should always have a mental list of where people play, what utility they used, and yeah, you should just always mentally know where people play and the utility they use. Like, you should have like a mini map image in your head at all times, and that image should be very easy to create because your team should be constantly communicating with you. So that's the first thing to do on every team, by the way. First thing to do is get your fucking communications down, because you can't do shit unless you have a baseline level of high communications amongst all your players. And that's about it. Again, it really, like, when you're making calls, it really just comes down to past experience and how you could adapt that experience to the current situation. And if you're having trouble adapting it to the current situation, that means you're lacking enough past experience within relevancy. So you need to work to develop that. And you can do that by watching other people play, analyzing how they play, and watching yourself back when you run into these experiences that you were lacking the ability to make calls on. And you go, okay, now that I am post-game and I have time to actually think, what would I have done? And now you won't make that mistake again. And also importantly, record these somewhere, because you'll find that sometimes you implement a solution and then you run into that situation again and it doesn't work. And you have to think, was the situation the same? If not, what was different? And what can I change for this different situation? If it was, what was my first solution? What was the new solution? And why did neither one work? And now what's a new solution that I can implement that might work? And you gotta consider these things all the time. It's really tough, man. It's not easy. That's why a lot of teams have coaches and analysts backing up the players. It's really not easy. But I really hope this helped. And if you have any other questions, please DM them to me or send them and ask a coach. Again, this is a really long-winded answer, but these were not simple questions. It's team play is really hard, really complicated, and there's a reason why resources for team play are not openly out there, because it's very hard to make resources for it. It's just tough, man. That's a goal of mine to get into eventually, because one of my missions is to democratize Valorant information to all. But God, team play is so hard. Good luck, man. Good luck.